Good afternoon, Frank.
Hi, Professor. How are you?
It's been an exciting week, and two major deadlines are coming up tomorrow for Greece and for Iran. And then there's this problem of the heat wave in South Asia, which
Yeah.
is very strange because I based on my own experience in South Asia, don't really think that it's much different from normal. But of course, I'm not there.
hmm
But I did. The media don't tell you what the temperature actually is.
Oh, well, we figured it out. I figured it's like
And
about 113 degrees at times in Karachi.
well, it's been in the mid 40s
Yeah, Celsius.
centigrade, which is probably 113 or so, and I don't think that's unusual. I think it's essentially because this is the hottest time of the year, before the monsoon,
hmm
and this is the so I think it's primarily a problem of it's a social problem. That is, it's people who are there's more people than there ever have been before, and they don't have the resources they've had before.
Well, the Pakistanis are saying that a lot of it is due to the confluence of Ramadan happening.
And that's, of course, another problem,
Yeah,
yes.
which
Uh,
is leading all of the residents, for example, of Karachi to ignite their appliances at the same time at sunset so they can make their evening meals, which is, of course, causing many severe electrical blackouts,
yeah.
which then imperils everything. I mean,
In a country that has energy problems to
to
begin with.
begin with. Right, right.
Yeah. No, Ramadan is certainly part of the problem.
So,
But I mean, I thought we had to say something about that simply because people are talking about climate change all the time.
oh, it's over 1,000 people have died. It's a
Yeah,
terrible
yeah.
situation. Yeah.
But I think that human beings have been adapting to climate change for thousands of years, and the problem at the moment is that their adaptation is not working as well as it might do because of other factors.
hmm
Anyway, the deadlines tomorrow are really quite amazing things to watch because we have no experience of this sort of thing at all, right? And as far as the financial deadline is concerned, the deadline for Greece to make a payment of what, $1.5 billion to IMF. I may not have the figure quite right because there's so many zeros, and I find the zeros confusing. But the the lead up to it, um, a lot of things have been happening today because of what might happen tomorrow,
Yeah, yeah. Well, the U.S. stock market is down about 350 points right now.
which is what, 1%,
Yeah, it'd be about 1%. Yeah, and then
and the FTSE is down,
everybody's down. Yeah.
and but even the Chinese and the Japanese markets are down.
Well, the Chinese market went down 7% the other day. They're down 20% for their highs for the year. But
Uh-huh.
a lot of that is an internal Chinese issue, supposedly.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, I'll tell you, I had not been particularly sympathetic toward the Greeks. But then I read a column today by Paul Krugman in the Times, who's a very cogent observer. And Krugman pointed out once again that, I mean, the whole euro as a currency idea is sort of crazy to begin with because it doesn't have a euro-wide treasury. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
so it's a little bit
It's
of
an experimental currency.
it's an experimental currency. The Greeks now, for the past 5 years, have in fact implemented draconian austerity measures.
Mhm.
That, for example, if they were still using the drachma, would perhaps have been able, Krugman's theory goes, would perhaps have been able to devalue their currency,
Mhm.
increase their exports, and begin to make up for the lost ground begin to pay the debt back. But of course, they can't do that because they
No.
don't have any control over how to devalue the euro. I mean, it's the
Mm.
same value in Athens as it is in Berlin.
Mhm.
So his theory was that the Greeks should vote with Cyprus on Sunday and say we're not taking the deal and just force some sort of restructure and leave because the way it stands now is the international creditors are insisting on the euro peg, and he doesn't see any economic way out in the future for Greece to be able to to obtain the necessary devaluation to increase their exports.
No, it really is a test for the management of Europe rather than a test for the Greek government. But the Greek government is in a position where it has to actually make the decision, or at least that's what it appears at the moment. But I think that I would like to think that there are enough sensible people in the upper echelons of the European administration that they will, in fact, find a way to keep Greece in there, even if it's only because they realize that it's going to cause a lot of damage to Europe if Greece leaves.
Well, I share your hope, but it's going to come down to Merkel and company talking seriously about some sort of debt forgiveness. All right, and that's not going to sit well. I mean, you know, it's a long way from Jean Monnet's goal here. I mean, we're not there yet. I mean, people.
But surely they're going to realize that the currency cannot be managed just by a central bank.
I can understand that, but the question is how are politicians then going to explain that to their voters? I mean, can you imagine David Cameron explaining that to his voters when that vote comes up?
No, but he doesn't have to.
No, he doesn't have to, but they're politicians. We always operate under the assumption are interested mainly in being reelected.
Yeah, but
So,
he said he doesn't want to be reelected.
all right, well, let's skip Cameron. Let's move on to Felipe Gonzalez in Spain or whomever, anybody.
Hollande is
Yeah.
probably the biggest problem.
Who?
Hollande.
Oh, yes. Well, him too. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, what it has to be done. Something. I mean, what needs to happen is a strong leader has to come out and say, look, all right, this has been a great experiment. All right, it's worked pretty well. Economically, Europe has done very well collectively. But what we have to recognize is that what's happened in Greece is, as Thomas Jefferson said, the fire bell tolling in the night. It's going to keep happening. So we're going to like cut the debt for them. We're going to give them a break. We're going to keep them in. But what has to happen is we have to have an EU-wide treasury to be able to sustain and support the currency so we don't have situations like this again.
and they
And
have to have an EU-wide financial policy.
they do.
That's
They,
the problem.
they don't
And this
have that.
is, I think this is the first time since money became more important than land, which was probably in the 17th century as a means for wealth, that anything like this has happened, that people have, the people that, the government has not been able to control the currency.
Well, I suspect it's even worse than that because if I was Alexis Tsipras, I would probably be saying to you, we can control our currency fine. Let us go back to the drachma. We'll be fine. But the problem is there's one currency now for 17 different nations,
Yeah.
and it's it everybody's it's a real intertwined mess. That's why apparently yesterday Angela Merkel made no public statement. She was rumored to be sending feelers out to the Greeks. Some saying, from what I read, talking almost about debt forgiveness. Well, I never saw that word published. But I mean, the Germans in particular have an awful lot to lose here because if this euro unravels, I mean, they're in big trouble. I mean,
Well, it seems to me that they really need to find a way of solving this problem without using the term debt forgiveness, but using terminology that gives everybody the understanding that they're reorganizing the financial policy of the European Union
they have
in
to do
such a
that.
way that it takes account of the problems that led to the current situation.
They have to do
Because
that.
after all, Greece is just the worst of several problems. Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Italy, even France
Hmm.
are have terrible problems, and it's worked to the advantage of some governments and the disadvantage of others. And what is it, 17 years now since the euro was?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, so that's one of tomorrow's deadlines, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to that. But the the um, the other one is the Iran deadline, which they've already said. They were
That's
saying this morning that it was a self-imposed deadline, so we can go beyond it. But
that's the most movable deadline I've ever seen.
I was uh, driving through campus a couple of hours ago, and there was a big sign up at one of the biggest crossroads on campus, at 36th and Walnut.
Hmm.
I mean, it was at least 6 foot by 6 foot, standing up on the ground on the corner, um, with wording all the way down that could be read at a distance, saying that this has to be stopped. There must be no agreement between Obama and Iran.
Oh, yeah.
Philadelphia will be rubble
Yeah, yeah.
if that agreement occurs.
No, that's, I think I saw a similar ad today in the New York Times.
We can't. That's the New York Times.
Full page ad, the New York Times, first section.
Hmm.
We can't trust Iran.
And I think this is. I mean, the euro problem is an example of something that could be related to globalization, because obviously national currencies are not going to continue to work exactly the same way that they're working now. But the Iran situation is a very different sort of indicator of what's going on with globalization, because there is so much information, and therefore we no longer know. We have no way of telling whose information is more reliable than the rest of the information, and public opinion, it sort of circulates and is volatile and changes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that needs to be decided by a lot of people is very difficult to get decided. Elections work because it's what exactly everybody happens to decide on one particular day. They may be sorry for it afterwards, but at least. But when it's trying to work towards a decision that doesn't have a definite deadline and would be a decision that would be acceptable for everybody, is becoming impossible.
Well, I agree with that, and I think what does not help my understanding of the situation are the two statements made by the Iranian Supreme Leader this past week, and he just, if I was John Kerry and I'm reading his statements, I'd be like pulling my hair out. I'd be like, what's the point of even going to these meetings? I mean, we go to the meetings, we agree on a preliminary framework. Khamenei welcomes the return of the foreign minister, said they've done a good job. The initial soundings and even the Revolutionary Guard leaders are saying they're going to go along with it. And the next thing, you get this confusing at best, at worst, anti-preliminary agreement statement from the Supreme Leader. So, I mean, he's just giving fuel to the people who are saying that there should be no deal.
But because he has more information than most other people do, and most of the people who are against it have made up their minds that they're against it without looking for the information. But the problem is that up until fairly recently, all the argument was about how many centrifuges,
Mm-hmm.
i.e. it was about how long it would take Iran to build a bomb if they wanted to build a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Now the argument is not about that anymore. It's about whether we can monitor everything that's going on in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And those two, they're two different arguments which relate to a lot of different types of information. And at the base of everything, from the Iranian point of view is what America did to Iran in 1953 when it got rid of organized a coup that got rid of a democratically elected government. And what's behind everything from the American point of view is what Iran did to America in November 1979 when it took over the American embassy.
Right, right.
And then what's aggravating the situation now is what America did to help Iraq during the 9-year war that Iraq
Right.
declared on Iran between 1980 and 1989. And the reason that the supreme leader won't open up all military facilities in Iran to international inspectors was that he doesn't trust every other country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Iran would have no security at all if he did that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very sensible decision.
Well, it's a sensible decision, and the people I'm watching closely have not said anything for a while. That would be in Tel Aviv. And I found it fascinating 2 weeks ago that the story leaked that the Israelis most likely had been bugging the hotels in Geneva and Lausanne where the discussions were going on, and even also apparently were bugging the cell phones of the participants. So they were as tuned in as anybody as to what the content of the meeting was, and they've been Netanyahu for him anyway has been actually very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got my ears tuned to them to see what they're going to say.
So tomorrow is going to be very interesting.
It will be. It will be. And as I said, the first story that comes with the Dateline Tel Aviv, I'm going to be paying very close attention to.
Oh,
So,
okay.
all right, Professor. Listen, a pleasure, and we'll talk again very soon.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye.